Hello and welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers podcast. And if you are listening to this as we release it, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
That's right, 2024. Somehow we're still here. Thank you for joining us yet again. My name is Chris Armstrong and I am joined tonight by David Maynard.
Hello.
Russell Craxford.
Hello, Happy New Year.
And the one and only FullSnackTester, Mr. Ben Dowen.
Hello, great to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Well, today we're going to be speaking about collaboration. But before we dive into anything more than that, we want to say a thank you to our sponsor, Saffron QA, who continue to be our sponsor. And they are also here to support the testing community. Therefore, should any of our listeners be in the market for a new job in testing or hiring talent for your team, please reach out to Ben. He can be contacted via email at ben@saffronqa.co.uk, and you can find more details in the show notes. Now, as we like to do with our new joiners to the podcast, we're going to invite them to ice break. I can't speak. Break the ice, Ben, please.
Thank you very much, Chris. So, as the year comes hurtling towards the end, my team have started to set up all sorts of end-of-year retrospectives. It made me think about the fact that every retrospective and all the actions that you collect up are effectively many different New Year's resolutions to change the things that we're doing. So what I would like to know, Chris, is what is your New Year's resolution?
Jeepers, New Year's resolutions. So every year I try and take up something new rather than like lose weight or be exercisey, which are things I need to be doing all year round, but I'm not very good at. I try to get into the habit. So for 2023, I was trying to read at least a chapter of a book every single day. And I did really good until about March. So my goal is to smash that and at least get through to Easter time to be able to read at least a chapter of a book every single day. I love it. I love doing those sorts of things, but it's like a routine and a habit thing, and I kind of fall away. So that's my goal. You can hold me accountable, check in on me, and I'll try and do the same for you, my friend.
So I was going to choose something similar, but I might have to try and think of another one. Because again, I was going to choose fitness, but because I've neglected it a little bit. But that seems something that I normally do. And I was going to choose reading a book a month, but a chapter a day, I can't really beat that. So I think what I'm actually going to do, we've just bought a cookbook of curry. So I want to be better at making curries and actually blend the spices, because usually we just buy a pot. So I think that's going to be my resolution, is to produce some good curries that we'll reuse.
Do you need any testers for that, David?
Probably, yes. My family will try them.
Maybe by March 14th, you might have got it down.
Possibly, yeah. Shall I provide the evening meal the night before?
I'm down.
That's only 3 months for me to perfect something. So we'll see. I'll work hard.
Plenty. How many hours is there in 3 months?
10 weeks.
Hinting towards that, I guess my New Year's resolution or my New Year's aim is make PeersCon successful. Simple as that. But make it successful to me, I guess, means collaborative, fun, interesting, slightly different, but useful to people. And I think that's kind of going to be what I'm going to be spending a lot of time, certainly the first few months of the year, working towards with my colleagues, friends, and peers. How about you, Ben?
For me, it is going to be submitting talks to conferences. Obviously, I'd love to have a New Year's resolution of talking at a conference, and that is the ultimate goal. But it's kind of a blocker if you never submit the talks, and I've never submitted the talks. So I can't complain I've never spoken at conferences if I haven't tried. So my New Year's resolution this year is I'm going to submit some talks to some conferences.
That's a brilliant resolution.
It's a good one, yes.
Like, you've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. I know you've done some good online stuff, and I want to hear you on the stage too. All right. Well, I almost went into Ice Ice Baby, but I didn't want to get cut out of the edit, so I didn't. So, Ben, anyway, collaboration, friends. It's a really broad topic. We work together in a community right here doing these things. Where do we think we want to start? Ben, maybe you want to tell us, how do you collaborate at work?
Real thing, Chris. So I really love collaborating. It's one of the things that makes me really smile about work when I get a chance to do it. So some of the collaborating I really like more than anything else is doing things as a pair or a small group, as an ensemble. Like actually having multiple people working towards the same thing at the same time and doing the work simultaneously. I think it really bring something that's really hard to kind of get to in other ways, both in terms of kind of building the relationships and building the team and those kind of things, but also you just get better work. There's a terrible myth that it's inefficient to have multiple people actually working on the same thing at the same time. And in reality, it's entirely the opposite. You can really get unblocked so much quicker. So one of the things that I like to do is book regular sessions with different groups of people in my team. So I have like a front end ensemble and a back end ensemble and a data quality ensemble. And they're all kind of open in my team calendar. And it's not only the front engineers and the back engineers and the data engineers that join, but they kind of represents the topic. And it gives us a chance to, as a team, do a bit of collaboration on one of those topics, make sure we pay attention to a little bit of that collaboratively every sprint. And I've had some good success with that. And like I say, some good success, especially getting some of the back end engineers joining some of the front end calls and kind of creating opportunities to start the different members of the team doing work together. Whereas sometimes without that encouragement, you tend to find people focus on doing solo work and then they get maybe lost in the weeds for a day or two before they reach out to get help or get review. And then rework tends to take a little bit longer. So that's the thing that I kind of focus on with the collaboration.
I've had similar experience. Most recently, I know of 2 examples where some of our group have done pair testing or pair programming. The 2 examples are, one was new to a project, and so they were paired with an existing person, and it's going incredibly well. They work together, they work a little bit independently on the same tickets, but it's been really seen as a success. There's another group where there are actually 3 of them working together on a group of tickets, and actually that works really well. They've got their own little Teams channel, and it almost encourages healthy, I hate to use the word competition, but that people don't want to let each other down. So actually they encourage each other to do their best work because actually they want to do the best.
Like accountability in action.
It is
as well,
accountability.
yeah.
And if someone isn't able to be there for sickness or holiday or whatever, then the other 2 will step up and go, don't worry about it. I know what you're working on. We can still get the work done. And I think that's the power of collaboration, in that people know the knowledge. And exactly as you say, Chris, it's the accountability. It's the ability to ensure that work gets done at the regular pace, but also allows the communication. It allows that communication so that you don't really have a blockage, because you've got that network of people that you can immediately talk to in order to unblock yourself, or at least collaborate as to where you need to ask to unblock yourself, rather than that isolation and possibly procrastination of trying to work it out yourself.
There's a lot of things we've already touched upon: accountability, communication, collective ownership. Like we hear people say quality is everyone's responsibility. Surely that only really works through collaboration. Surely if we work in some form of agile ways of working, surely these are things that should naturally manifest in the way that we work. A lot of collaboration isn't predetermined. It's experimenting together. It's learning together what works for us. I certainly, when I've paired with people, I've not done the same thing with the same people. It's I've moved around. Different people have got different perspectives, different preferences, different periods of time that they can focus. So there's a lot of flexibility and finding our ways with these people. It's quite exciting. I can imagine how some people who are used to specific ways of working would find it quite challenging, quite different, quite unsettling. Have we got any stories of where we've tried to introduce collaboration in the workplace and we've met these things, and how have we maybe helped address those issues?
So one of the things that I can reflect on where it's gone very well, but I think almost it was a surprise to the people I was pairing with how well that it went, is that over a period of kind of 6 to 12 months, I introduced a group of medical knowledge engineers who are like doctors that code, as I like to call them, to both the concept of pairing and ensembles, and at the same time the idea of exploratory testing. So this is what we did: is we created a regular setup where we're doing exploratory testing. And these weren't traditional, developers or engineers or testers. These are people who have a medical, clinical background. And one of the things I found, which was really fascinating for me, is that the way that they reflected on the collaboration was that they were actually really surprised. Ooh, it's really fun to be able to work together on the same thing. And it's really excellent that even though we're in the same team and even though we're following the same very rigid process, we're seeing the way that other people do this testing that we're doing and we're learning things. And it was a big surprise to them because the culture from actually training to be a doctor that they shared with me is that you really get it drilled into you. You are on the line to do this. You mustn't pass this on to other people. You must do this on your own. And it's competitive. So you must become the best doctor you can be independently and not collaborate with other people. And it's a very different culture to kind of working in a software development team. So it was a really big shift from where we started, where people were like, what do you mean work together? Then after a period of time, people were like, "Ooh, can I?" Like people were queuing up to join into the sessions because they'd heard from other people. Hang on, there's a different way to do this, and that worked really well. But it was a slow burn. This wasn't like something we could introduce whole scale very quickly. It's something that took a long time to slowly build up because the culture needed to shift quite significantly from that kind of more rigid independent work to the more collaborative and exploratory work.
I was thinking of when we talked about the word collaboration, there were certain things that sprung to my mind. Ensembler testing, as we said, pairing, things like that. We've got lots of tools that help us collaborate more. Source control, Slack, MS Teams, Zoom, all these sorts of different tools out there that actually help us collaborate, whether we're in the same location or not, whether we're in the same country or not, same time zone. And it's changed, I think, it's certainly changed the way I look at some collaborative work that we do. That there is the in the moment collaborative work. But even like 365, Word, PowerPoints, the way in which we share information now rather than emails back and forth of a PowerPoint deck, we actually can collaborate in the cloud and actually we can see the changes someone else is making simultaneously with us. There's so many things that we collaborate on. I know you're a fan of certain collaboration tools in terms of like retrospectives even, but in terms of kind of brainstorming ideas, Metro Retro, Miro, there's quite a few of these different tools out there. But they allow us to kind of build other collaborative tools as well. So we can build team charters. We can build different approaches that allow us to actually set out our stall to what we mean by collaboration, to create a culture that says it's okay to give feedback. It's okay to hold people to account within reason to everything, like most things. But actually that encourages those behaviors of pairing, ensembling, and it becomes the status quo, the norm, versus kind of an alien concept in that we build somewhere where we nurture, as you mentioned, sort of medics and things, have a culture where they've been the opposite of that nurturing, but where we nurture in software, this idea that we are a team. We talk about culture add, quality is everyone's responsibility. Security is everyone's responsibility. Everything's everyone's responsibilities. But that's a great statement, but it's actually by collaboration you make it possible. And all these different tools I just mentioned in a huge list are the ways in which we can do that. And I know I'm sure Chris has got some great examples of kind of building charters. And I know as testing peers, we once did build a charter and we need to do it again.
It speaks to a few things, doesn't it, as well? Like we've mentioned sort of like leadership versus dictatorship, teams owning and being empowered and to have self-determination and all these things. That doesn't happen unless people collaborate. If we sit things out and wait to be spoon-fed, then we're not collaborating. Collaboration is actually, it speaks a lot to this whole sense of community that we're a part of, be that the wider testing community, communities in the workplace, communities of practice, the testing peers community, all these sorts of things. They are a give and take. There's participation. People will have seasons of giving more and taking more at different times. And the beautiful thing about collaboration is we've got that flexibility to ebb and flow with these things, and we see that with sort of sprints, with sort of burn downs and velocity charts. We learn our capacity better as we understand how we all work together, and we know how we can work better and which areas we've got more strengths, where we've got weaknesses, and we work together to identify how we can improve things, and we learn our own sorts of environments. But these things don't ever stay static, do they? There's always room for continuous improvement, and there's changes to dynamics all of the time. It could be folks going away, new people joining, teams splitting. You begin to work on new products, and you understand new customers, and all of that changes our dynamic. And so that world of being sort of fixed and linear in the way that we work in perpetuity, it changes. And so I think a lot of collaboration requires flexibility, not just thinking on your feet, but pulling on all these experiences and these tools that we have and applying them. I mean, that's the thing. You've talked about making charters and things. A published charter isn't therefore ad infinitum being relevant and gospel for that team, because that team changes, right? So we talk about the goals of living documentation and things being up to date and relevant all the time. That only happens if a team owns that stuff and actually lives and breathes those ways of working. And staying up to date and relevant all the time, damn, that's not easy.
I've got a question for you. Have you ever experienced or got some stories about the opposite of collaboration, right? I'm thinking throw it over the wall. I'm thinking whether that's a passover from dev to test as if they're separate things, or where you've as a team, you're oh, that's it, we're done with that, next. And then it's gone over to someone else and it's kind of, really messed them up, I think.
How long have you got, Ben?
Yeah.
In every description you described, I could probably think of scenarios where I've seen that happen. In all honesty, it's not myth. The biggest ones I see more often these days is leadership strategy, and myself included, as a leader, in making sure that we enable feedback from both the leadership tiers, but also from the practitioner tiers. So actually we do not closed loop, do an infinite loop in a way. And it's really hard because it's time consuming. It's very easy for me as a leader just to go, that's what we should do. And I try my best to avoid it. But there's many times where I've had to do it. So if you ask people to collaborate, but no one's got time, you can't make them make time, you can't do it, but you can try and set the example and try and encourage it still. But there's many times where you've had to, as a leader, decree patterns. And sometimes autocratic leadership styles are needed for certain decision-making processes. You can't be collaborative on everything. Sometimes you can have too much collaboration, but it can't be the only model of leadership. But I've seen quite a lot with standards, policies, and those sorts of areas of businesses where someone, aka a leader, is told you own it, you decide it, you do it, and then you tell someone else, which is great in principle. Sounds really easy. But then 6 different leaders create 6 different standards that conflict. And then your teams can't do anything. And it's hilarious in a bad way. But yes, I can't name names because I just can't. But I've seen it in many places, I have to be honest.
Oh, that all triggers me so much. I won't name names either, but I've definitely been in situations in my career where competing different managers from a product point of view have had very conflicting priorities, and they're trying to push their agenda, and rather than collaborating with each other, they just both put pressure on us as engineering teams to get the thing they want done next. That is so destructive. That's definitely a lack of collaboration at the level where it's very destructive.
I think we've all, as Russell said, we've all got examples of sort of office politics where, as you say, Ben, is everyone has their own agenda and has fought their agenda to be the most important, and therefore then the rest, as you say, the opposite of collaboration is that teams tear themselves apart to try and please all the managers, and chaos ensues.
I was thinking, bringing about change, which collaboration often does, it's quite a conscious sort of thing. It can be met with a lot of resistance, and I know I touched on that already, but why do you think we get resistance to this? Do you think it's always because people are comfortable in the way that they're working, or do you think it's because people are uncomfortable that the change will not benefit them, and we're thinking about ourselves with these eyes? I've weirdly got a bit of Bob Hoskins playing Smee and Hook in my mind saying, what about Smee? But it's very easy to be self-involved and think about yourself, and you're concerning yourself rather than about the team. We live in an environment where we're very often given individual goals, individual metrics and measures of our own successes. We look at the number of story points that we've achieved and the number of bugs that we've maybe raised or resolved and the number of test cases and blah, 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 that are people, individuals. Yeah. And I've heard compelling arguments why it doesn't work for us to immediately shift to whole team. It can require a bit of a shift that's a slow shift. Yeah. A gradual move. We can't just boil the ocean, as one of my colleagues likes to say. You have to start somewhere and work towards that end goal in order to achieve these things, because people are all on different journeys, and collaboration doesn't come naturally. Just because something makes sense to you and you can explain it a million different ways. It doesn't mean, I mean, like, I'm a parent. I can tell you, I can tell my kids 100 times the same thing. It doesn't, until it makes sense to them, they're just going to keep on rolling over. And it's not too dissimilar in the workplace, right?
I know I can speak from personal experience, whereas I've failed, I guess is probably the right way of framing it, where I've tried to collaborate and it's not gone. Was that what you were after, Chris? Sorry, I've forgotten the question now.
It's individuals, collaboration, resistance to change, all those sorts of good things or bad things.
Yeah, so as a leader, I've made mistakes. I'll not pretend otherwise. And that is kind of, sometimes it's normally in my case, pressure of time, stress, and other situations where I know collaboration is the right way, getting feedback and making decisions, getting people involved in it. But where I felt that a decision is needed urgently, or as much as I've tried to persuade my point of view, or to the strategy that I wish to try and encourage us to move towards, there is a feeling against that because there's a barrier, I think is what I would say. I may have just been in the wrong. That is also a possibility as well. But it's trying to encourage people to think outside the box, to think differently. Microservices, for example, with them building monoliths. If you go and just ask, and you can't just ask people that are used to one thing to pivot entirely without some training and awareness to do it. So that you then ask them to collaborate, then you basically stamp over them. And that's not deliberate. It's not meant to be nasty, but it's often the case. So you've got to make sure that you can put people in a position where they can grow and learn. And that sometimes is time bound. So if I've got to do a microservice test strategy by the end of next week, and I want to do it collaboratively, I put a few hours in, do a little workshop, I've got to make sure I've trained people into that first. But I'm not going to be able to persuade people to collaborate and get to where I want to get to. And I don't actually have the outcome, but I know it's different. That's the point. Whereas actually it might default standard. So I've certainly failed as a leader at times because I've tried to do it where it wasn't the most appropriate place, and I should have been autocratic. And I should have said, this is our principles that we're going to try and get towards. Let's build this over time. Context. Yeah. So I've definitely done less than ideal because I didn't know when I should have been collaborating and when I should have been making a decision. And that's sometimes a hard thing to understand because you want to collaborate. I want the input, but there is a balancing point to when input's useful.
And it's hard when you're reporting up to these things on what you're working on, right? Like sometimes people want to get from you and you're like, oh, I'm collaborating with these folks to try and create these things. And they're like, but you're the leader, you must make these things come into reality. I remember in an interview, I was asked how I would review a tester's performance. And I said, well, if they're not in my team, I'd be collaborating with those in their team, getting a picture of what they've done. I wouldn't purely just base it off metrics on a dashboard. I would work with the people that work with them and get a picture. You know, I think some places like have 360 reviews and stuff, right? And paint a picture across many different relevant people's perspectives. And then from there, I'd be able to have a much more assured and confident report on them. And they were like, so you would rely on other people to do your job, you know? Shocked face. But I understand, like, communicating what you want to do to get buy-in with folks that you're working with is one thing, but to then sell that upwards, especially where folks at the top just expect you to get stuff done. Either you create a big project plan and then just follow it, or you assign different responsibilities to different people and everyone is time bound and blah, blah, blah. It's quite difficult to shift mindset and approach, or even to prove that this is the right thing, if that is the right thing to do. You end up sort of becoming a salesman for collaboration quite often. And so you've got to be bought in on these things. Like, have you had like these, we've talked a lot about stuff, little bits we've done, but have there been moments where you've gone, this was exactly the right thing to do? Like, I've got now like some sort of like a mental little sort of story that I can recall when in the future, when somebody says, why would you do this? And go, well, here's an example of this thing that I did this, and here's my ROI. Here's some amazing outcomes from this great bit of collaboration that we did. Have we got some good success stories?
Yeah, I'm going to say I have. When I've had time and I'm trying to introduce a new test strategy, and I mean that in the loosest sense of test strategy, not like 3,000-page documents, but the same principles into which we want to try and do it. When I've actually done that as a command and control, as in here they are, you're now following them, nothing happens, no one changes, no engagement, same status quo, nothing. Maybe one person out of a team of 100 goes, they sound good. But that's about it. That's the impact of your change. But when I've done it as kind of collaborative sessions with a group of people, maybe not the whole practice, maybe some of the practice, but tried to get people involved in it, they've generally understood where it's come from. They've got a context more from it. They don't agree with all of it. And there was healthy discussions between different individuals in those teams, including, actually, I've done test strategies, I've done quality strategies with devs, the whole team in effect, rather than just testers. And you'd often get some healthy challenges. Well, why are we doing that? Because we can do this. It's like, brilliant. Now we know that's in the open. And actually, the team felt much more comfortable with what they were doing and where. The testers felt more comfortable. There was more trust between dev and test. They didn't see them as kind of evil antagonists. And it actually had a much better quality outcome for the consumer at the end of it, because the team worked better together. They knew understand what and why, and they could insert things into it. So there's principles like we want to test early. We need to automate independently. Those are the things I kind of introduced to them, and it's like, well, how do we do these things? Why should we do these things? And actually, that got adopted, and actually then got adopted by lots of other teams in that organization where I was a consultant. The one where I just wrote loads of principles, that went on someone's desk, never to be seen again.
Yeah, I've worked with groups before, lots of groups, and it is that buy-in in order to get things adopted, and the collaboration is making sure that they understand the reasons why we're making a change, the reasons why, the thought process behind it. And once that can be explained, so rather than being told to actually use something, if they have buy-in, then they're more likely to use it, which is exactly what Russell says. They can see the benefit of the value to them. And you can have healthy discussions in order to explain that. There have been quite a few times we'd have quite frequently workshops or forums where we discuss ideas and how we can improve processes and change. And we have personal retros, which we then drive into change and collaboration. So therefore they have part ownership of those changes because they had an input right from the start. And it's those sort of changes that have been really beneficial and have shown traction because they've had buy-in from the start.
I think those are some really powerful examples. I think there's a word that perhaps goes with this, which is co-creation. So the fact that you're actually kind of including people and creating it with them is a really powerful tool to get that more buy-in. And it's a really important part of collaboration. And I think one thing, and maybe you can reflect on this a little bit more, but David and Russell, the examples you were giving there, it made me realize that a lot of the collaboration I'm doing and the stuff that I talk about collaboration is very much task-based collaboration for getting things done that we're already agreed we're doing within a sprint, which is quite different from the kind of leadership collaboration you're talking about in terms of how do we set strategy, how do we collaborate to change direction. And I think it's worth calling out that both of those are super useful. Both of those involve definitely a lot of collaboration, but then the mechanics are maybe quite different.
They are, and to your point, they have both got great value, because we didn't mention the sort of pairing, but the ability to persuade an individual is much easier in a one-to-one situation, to explain yourself, to justify things like I mentioned, I think before, sort of radical candor sort of thing, and actually being kind of upfront and explaining things and being sort of transparent with people. That's much easier in a one-to-one situation in a group. People feel much more threatened in a group. But if you're standing next to somebody and just going, I see what you've done there. I probably would do it like this, but actually, this is the advantages of my kind of thinking. What's yours? And those sorts of things. So you actually get things open. That collaboration builds trust. It builds teamwork. It's an enabler for what we're talking about as well. Because if we don't trust each other, collaboration doesn't actually happen. There's layers and there's tiers of it, to your point, Ben, I think. Different people in different roles will have different influence. Like if I'm wanting to persuade another team to adopt something, I might do pairing. I might do a deck or a presentation with them. I'm not doing much testing these days. But, I could do if I was testing, but I love doing exploratory testing still. So I'd love to kind of do that and pair up on it. I don't do it as much as I would love to. So I think you're right that there is different layers, different complexities to it, different value to it, but they are all valuable in different ways, influencing an individual, influencing a team, influencing organizations. They're all collaboratively still a better model, always. Most of the time. I'll change my mind.
Always, most of the time. It's all quite similar, really.
Oh, when I say always, I mean 80-20. I never mean actually always.
I was thinking, there's something to be said for collaboration leaning into a sense of belonging. Why are we drawn to people? Why do we enjoy working with certain people, working on certain things with other people? And we've touched on community. A lot of us are in community, we feel like we belong. These are sort of our people, and we talk about getting on the same page. And there isn't really a one way to do these things, right? There's a whole bunch of really useful different techniques and platforms. Some people are very visual. Some people learn and collaborate by doing together. Some people would rather do this async cool tool stuff that we've been able to do, and there's thankfully been well developed since the pandemic started, because no one wants to be using Skype for business anymore. But there's a lot of really, really not a good tool.
Agreed.
But belonging and focus and drive and that whole why are we doing these things, getting on the same page, that goal, there's not necessarily one way to do that, but to actually know why the hell we're here, what the hell we're trying to achieve, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and how are we going to work together to do these things, to know that you're supported rather than judged. You enjoy working in a place where you feel challenged but safe. It's a lot of cultural stuff there, and I'm really conscious that when I'm uncomfortable in the bad way, it's a place I don't want to be. But the minute I feel safe, supported, and excited, I am motivated to do better work. I'm going to achieve more as an individual, but as a team, I know that we're going to do great things. And a team that's motivated, feels belonging, that's an incredibly special place to be.
Absolutely. And I think this is where, I know we were talking earlier about kind of layers and stuff like this. I think it's really important that you have that collaboration to build the culture within a team. But in terms of that sense of belonging, you can end up getting stuck with this idea that, oh, it's really great to work for my team, but what's this company I'm in, right? What's this group that I'm in? Just because the team works well doesn't automatically get you that feeling of belonging elsewhere.
And there's a danger you become exclusive and everyone else kind of isn't a part of your little clique.
Exactly. You build that silo to be strong. Or even a group within the team, right? We collaborate really well as back-end developers or something like that. It's like, great, but we're not just back-end developers. The team has other people in it. So I think being inclusive of all the different people within your team is super important. And I've seen a lot of benefits, mostly from collaborating from those people in the team who feel that they were under collaborated with and bringing them in, like making sure it's a bit like, teamwork is about building that team. You need to make sure everyone's coming in and joining in, and that's important. And then you need to figure out, and I know, Russell, you touched on this about working with other teams. Working with other teams really helps you build that empathy for the other teams, and then you stop throwing stuff over the wall in a way that screws them over, right? You stop, and the other way around, you stop getting stuff from them that stinks, right? The more you can work with other teams in a way where you gently show them, hey, this is the impact that it has on us if this thing goes well or if it stinks. This is the way that we can help you out. And like that kind of learning, that collaboration between teams, I found very, very powerful. And what I've found is that, like, from a testing point of view and a quality point of view, I often find it can be quite isolating because you're sometimes othered, especially when you're joining a new team or a new company. It feels like you're very much on the outside. But what you'll actually find is that a lot of organizations I've worked for, at least at some extent, their whole culture, their whole process is way over-engineered to effectively just feed dev work so that they are efficient, right? So that means every other role gets seen as a supporting role for development, every role. And what you'll find is that the SREs and the DevOps engineers or the platform engineers, whoever, whatever you want to call it, agile coaches, every other role is actually going through that same thing where they're struggling to communicate and to collaborate with the teams, and they feel like they're on the outside. So like, do start with your team, but I would definitely say that there's a huge amount of value there. Once you're comfortable with your team, start collaborating with these other roles. You'll find that actually they might be very keen to join the show, like super keen, and they probably don't have a way in to get into your team and start speaking to you. They probably don't know actually what the best way is. So reaching out to other teams to just give them a little bit of a, oh, hey, come join our demo, or, there's a thing we're doing next sprint that's going to mean we have loads more log messages than usual, bit of a heads up, whatever it is, just start that communication, find some allies in other teams, do a bit of networking. It will pay dividends. People will start to remember you exist, and then they'll start to pay back that favor and tell you what's coming up.
Very good point, Ben. It's about transparency, isn't it? Make it visible what you're doing and what so others inside other teams. Sometimes it's over communicate to just give an opportunity for someone to reach out to you. It is probably time we wish you a happy new year again, and we say good night, goodbye, good day, whatever time of day you're looking at. We've been talking about collaboration, and now's probably a really good time to point out that we're looking for collaborators. So we are going to put on a conference on the 14th of March 2024 in Nottingham. So this may be before or after this you're listening to this, so just be that aware. We are looking for people to help us support building a conference, so helping attendees, guests, and other things. And we're looking for anything different. If you've got an idea, you want to try something, experiment, we're looking to kind of do something that is for the peers, by the peers, and we are all peers. Testing Peers is not just us. Please do look at testingpeerscon.com. You can probably find it from our website, which is testingpeers.com. Slightly simpler.
And the show notes.
And the show notes, yes. And you can always reach us at contact@testingpeers.com. And you can find us on Twitter, or now X. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on other social media platforms that I can never remember the name of. And obviously the website. And you can download us from any good podcast store, which you probably have already done to be listening to this. So thank you once again. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. Thank you, my regular peers.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.